Good evening, I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. The Congress gathers, the lame duck Congress. You can all picture a small, cute duck with a bandage on its foot. It is a lame duck. That has great meaning this particular cycle because so much was left undone before the midterms. Joining me this evening to discuss the lame duck, the cute little lame duck, John Avlon, my co-host of CNN and the Daily Beast. Good evening, Mr. Avlon.
Good evening, John.
We're keen for the lame duck, and we're joined by Taegan Goddard as well of Political Wire, who for the first time we've convinced to come into studio. Taegan, a very good evening to you.
Good evening, John. Thanks.
You were very busy today on Political Wire, and well you might, because the day started with a wonderful display of ruffled feathers, continuing my metaphor of the lame duck, when Charlie Rangel of the 15th New York, the veteran congressman, walked out of the proceedings, the so-called ethics trial of violations that he is accused of by the House of Representatives. Taegan, was that expected, Mr. Rangel walking out? Was that in the script?
It was not at all expected. It was quite the spectacle, though. Rangel initially argued with the panel that he needed more time, that he had spent $2 million on attorneys, that he had no more funds left, and that he needed more time to get an attorney after all these many months and months and months. And at the end of his relatively short statement, he actually said it's not fair, treated himself as a victim, and left the hearing room, and pretty much spoke to reporters all the way to the elevator.
I mean, playing the victim card here was just ridiculous. This is just more delay and denial. That is the strategy. That is the reality of Charlie Rangel. But to say he is blindsided by a 2-year investigation, which had produced 50 witnesses, 28,000 pages, 13 counts. Everyone knew this was coming, supposed to be before the election, then delayed to after the election. And the crux of his argument was, hey, I've already spent $2 million on lawyers. And I can't go pro bono because it's an in-kind gift, but only a week ago you told me I could have a legal defense fund. Well, I don't think it takes a genius or a lawyer to figure out that the legal defense fund was a viable third option. And for him to play the victim card and claim to be blindsided not only threatened all credibility, or the credibility that Charlie Rangel has left, I mean, he shows, again, he's trying to game the system and play out the clock, and it's not going to work this time.
Did he scene steal from Mrs. Pelosi, and did that in any way change her script as she goes into her election? How do you see that, John?
It was a distraction that dominated the day. I think, if we're going to play evil communications genius on this one, you could make the argument that by walking out of the trial, by playing the victim card, he has thereby deprived the rest of the trial of the oxygen of attention. The people will not cover a trial without the inherent conflict of him defending himself alone. So thereby, maybe this is actually some brilliant move to have the media not pay attention to the trial as we go into the vote. But Pelosi and Rangel are tied at the hip. She defended him. She refused to condemn him, even when most of the information was coming in. And given that he won his re-election with 80% of his vote, he feels pretty inoculated himself.
Taegan, I rushed to this. Can we say that Charlie Rangel repudiated the ethics code?
To use Sarah Palin's new made-up word, which has now been blessed by
Word of the year, I read in Political Wire.
The new Oxford American Dictionary has now recognized repudiate as a word.
And we celebrate, we congratulate the former governor of Alaska. I think that she is owed an apology by all of us who, I'd say, cringed when we first heard the word.
We had days and days of fun with that word, and sure enough, it's not an Academy Award, it's not a Nobel Peace Prize, but President Obama has yet to create a word.
It is an enduring gift to us all, and it's right up there with misunderestimate and truthiness.
Right, right. Have you used repudiate on air yet, Mr. Avlon?
I haven't. I may have begun ironically, but increasingly it's got its own zip code. It's got its own meaning.
Yeah, Charlie Rangel repudiated the ethics panel. The Republicans are in town, and that is significant because we have two parts of the Republicans. There's the old party of no, and there's this new party of T. So, Mr. Avlon, the Republicans, they're concerned, greatly concerned, because I saw a letter from John Boehner pointing to a column from the well-known Wall Street Journal columnist warning the Republicans not to fall into the game of being kooky or being nutty. The concern here is that
phrase was wingnut.
Yes, and you are the author of Wingnut, so I come to you as this show's referee. How is the Tea Party doing in its first day? Have they avoided wingnuttery?
Look, I think the great accomplishment of the day was influencing Mitch McConnell to embrace an earmark moratorium. That is a huge win. It is an important one because it's on the substance of what the Tea Party always professed to believe in. Fiscal responsibility and not going by the ways of Washington. The down note asterisk was Ted Poe taking to the floor of Congress to ask for a ban on animal crushing videos, which was just sort of weird and off topic. But the real headline of the day, and which did violate Peggy Noonan's warning to them, I felt. But Mitch McConnell backing the earmark ban, that is a huge shift. It shows the strength of the Tea Party and the integrity of the Tea Party underlying it. So big get.
Taegan, I read in Political Wire today that the Tea Party may have an unusual father in George Bush. How does that work?
Well, I mean, I think that the story in National Journal this morning was pretty interesting. Essentially talking that the Tea Party had its roots in the policies of George Bush, and that George Bush was given a pass after 9/11 and fighting the war on terror as the federal budget exploded. But as soon as towards the end of his administration and the economic collapse happened and the bailout started, that's when the Tea Party just rose from its sleep and came out biting pretty hard. And it's a pretty interesting theory. And one, if you go to what happened today with earmarks, not only was Mitch McConnell on board, but President Obama came out supporting Mitch McConnell and saying, this is absolutely time for us to get this done.
My memory is that there were a couple of blackouts in New York City that were often used as an explanation for birth 9 months later. And 1965, I believe, comes to mind. John Avlon, can we now say that the TARP vote of September-October 2008 is that blackout that created the Tea Party?
You could make that argument. It may indeed be almost 9 months, give or take. April 15th, 2009. But I do think there's something to this. I mean, there was a lot of slumbering disenchantment with President Bush's spending, and especially for independent voters who tend to be fiscally conservative and socially liberal. Too much of his administration was fiscally liberal and socially conservative. And I do think that the Tea Party movement got its momentum beginning with that and then really accelerating with bailout backlash and then the stimulus bill. The one thing that I stumble on is the fact that President Bush, even when he was at the height or the depth of his unpopularity with the American people towards the end of his second term, still had a 70% approval rating among self-identified conservatives and Republicans. So it's not that he was such an unpopular figure with the base at the end of his presidency, but I think they found new purpose in both criticizing Obama, and the only way to make that logical step was to say, well, Bush was bad too.
The Tea Party, the Republican Party, I think I've got everything. Is there another party in town, Taegan? Is there anything else showing up this week?
I think the Democrats did show up.
Oh, good.
You just don't hear much from them this week.
Now, we did have 2 Democratic senators, and I read on Political Wire, become members of the Senate today immediately. That was Mr. Manchin and Mr. Coons. Why so?
That's right. Both Manchin and Coons won special elections in each of the respective states of Delaware and West Virginia, in which they then took over immediately. The third senator is Representative Mark Kirk, the senator-elect from Illinois, and he will take, due to state law in Illinois, he'll take office in a couple of weeks.
In a couple of weeks. So all 3 of these newly elected senators are now part of the lame duck.
Exactly.
And that's significant in terms of Harry Reid's voting and Mitch McConnell's voting, because remember, this little duck has a bandage on his foot, or her foot, and as we go forward in these next weeks, we'll discuss more of the Republican Party later on. Now we're going to turn to the markets, because they're watching as well. And so is Europe. There's trouble with the dollar. Have you heard about this? It's going lower against world currencies, and there's a reason why. The reason why is Ben Bernanke. John Avlon of CNN and the Daily Beast, Taegan Goddard of Political Wire. I'm John Batchelor.